This is Harry Droz, and you're listening to WNHHLP 103.5 FM, New Haven. This is Mubarakah and welcome to Mornings with Mubarakah, where we talk about national issues from a local level through a lens of diversity. You're listening live to 103.5 FM in the New Haven area. We're also broadcasting live on TuneIn Radio, and we're streaming live from downtown New Haven, of course. But you can also find us on Facebook if you want to see our beautiful faces. You can go to New Haven Independent page or Fit Muslima page. We're on the Periscope. We on the Gram. We just everywhere. So today is Wednesday, and you know that it's Wednesday because this is your Wednesday morning voice, Mubarakah. And it is a nice, gloomy, rainy day in New Haven. Every day that I come on, I always comment on the weather because it is just so all-encompassing of your mood. But you got to make the best of you got to make the best of a rainy situation, right, Ihsan? So we have a treat. So I am very happy to have with me today Ihsan Abdussabur. Ihsan is a young 17-year-old spoken word artist, photographer, video producer who does art that reflects his reality. And welcome and thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
So, Ihsan is a spoken word artist. Is that how you describe yourself, Ihsan? How do you describe the work that you do?
Yeah, spoken word artist sounds about right. The work that I do, you think you captured it, reflects my reality.
And how would you describe the type of, because you don't just do spoken word, you also have been doing, you've been doing videography for a little while, doing videos, and in the process of releasing your first video associated with one of your poems. So how would you describe your work, your art?
My work is pretty, I don't know, it seems like a wake-up call usually, because I feel like the work that I do really just explains the stuff that's being over-explained. Like when I have a conversation with people and they jumble over words or can't get the right words out, I usually just say like one sentence and they'll say like four. And that one sentence will just capture the whole main idea. So I feel like with the chaos that this nation and this country is facing, I feel like I can just say that one sentence in the poem or in a video, and that will capture the whole main idea of what's going on.
So you try to speak what other people, or articulate what other people have a harder time to articulate?
Oh, yeah.
When did you start writing poetry? And then talk to me a little bit about how you feel like your poetry has evolved. Is it based on your personal experience, based on just the things that you see? Like, when did you start?
I started writing poetry in middle school. I would say like 5th or 6th grade. I just write about experiences that I didn't feel like sharing to other people. So it was kind of like a diary or like a journal, just for like a self-care type writing. And then slowly, I remember when I went to Common Ground High School and freshman year, there was a poetry club. And instead of writing it down and leaving it in the notebook, I could actually speak out and share out to other people.
Mm-hmm.
So Mr. Wynn, my poetry advisor, would be all surprised when I always share out. And then I had like a bunch of poems in my Google Drive. And then he told me, "Hey, San, you should make a book." And I was like, "What?" And then he actually was a journalist, or still is, and he knows all the computer tech and he's tech savvy. So he helps me put up books. And then I learned how to do it myself. And I started making poetry books. And slowly, as I stopped talking about myself as like being, Ihsan and all the problems I face with personally, I started looking at a broader term of the identities that I carry, like being Muslim or being African American. And then I slowly started writing about that rather than just myself. And then it like branched out into the world. So now I just write about less personal issues and more environmental or civil or social rights.
Okay. When you so I recognize a lot of your poetry being reflective of kind of like the experience of being young and Black. Let's talk about that for a little bit. So explain kind of like how you view being young and Black now versus 5 years ago. Like, how has it changed for you as a young Black male? So we know, when we look at the TV and the internet and we see, this constant bombardment of visions of police officers killing young Black males, it's not that it just started happening. I mean, even during the Obama administration, Trayvon Martin was shot. But how has it changed at all as being a young Black male? The world kind of like has shifted since this last administration, this last election. How has it changed for you?
Well, for me, being Black is not fun. like it's not a rodeo, but it's weird because like what police brutality, like that stuff gets you. I feel like things don't get worse; it just gets more obvious. So when we see a lot of things on Facebook and Instagram about police brutality and about all the gentrification and everything that's going on to oppress Black people, it's not like, oh my gosh, it's happening more and more. It's just somebody finally posted about it. So when it comes to institutions and systematic racism and actually a lot of things that have to do with adults, like white adults oppressing Black minorities, it's the same. Like, it's the same. Like, another Trayvon Martin can get shot like any day now. Like, that's the same. But the thing that's weird to me is that being a Black teen to other teenagers is cool. Like, what? Like, because what they associate with, I feel like.
So let me stop you for a minute. So I'm interested to hear what you have to say about this, because I noticed in your previous sentence just now, you said adult whites oppressing Black people. So what is that generational difference that you think that you see?
I feel like, wait, what did you mean?
So you said now you're continuing to explain like to young white teens being Black is cool.
Yeah.
So you see an obvious generational difference, like older white people are different than younger white people. Tell me about that experience.
I feel like when, let's just like a slur, like if an older white guy calls me the N-word, he knows the ignorant history behind it. He's like, oh, all Black people are lazy, so I'm gonna call you this. Oh, this is my experience with you, so I'm gonna call you this. But now it's different. Like, now if a young white teen calls me the N-word, they'll do it but not understand why they're using it. They'll just throw it out because they know it's offensive, and they're really disconnected with the history and the historical baggage behind a lot of things. And like being, like I said, young white teens or young people just think Black teens are cool. Like, what? It's because what we associate it with through social media. Like, one of the major things is like challenges or whatever those challenges and what am I thinking of? And like those dances, like doing the nay nay and everything. Everybody's like, oh, white kids can't dance. but black kids can, and automatically like, oh, do you nay man? It's so cool. I like how you, and it's like, excuse me. All right. So like, because everybody's having fun, I feel like everybody, this also goes with social media, everybody getting tuned to social media, people living in that when it's fake more than the real world, because all their time is focused on what they see in like a kind of a small lens that just becomes their whole entire lens. So because they see this little piece that's not really true, that's just their whole life and it's just fake.
So they're viewing it through a lens instead of experiencing, actually interacting with black people.
Oh yeah.
So do you think that, so that brings an interesting question to mind. Do you think that as the older generation, and this is just what's going to happen because we're human beings, as the older generation die off and the younger generations take over, do you see it changing race relations in America?
I feel it will. I feel like as the younger generation grows up, there's a obvious disconnect in leadership when it comes to ending oppression in many ways. And because the history of race in this country has been just at a standstill, no one's really, like, kids aren't, like, I like to say, like, books aren't going viral anymore, more like videos and songs. So when there's like, oh, you gotta sit down and read that Malcolm X books, no one's gonna sit down and read a Malcolm X book. People watch This Is America like 1,000 times and try, oh, I know what it said. Like, no. So
they want to analyze a 4-minute video as opposed to reading a book.
That will take a month or something. Yeah. So because there's like a disconnect of what actually happened and what's actually going on, as the younger generation gets older and starts like taking charge, it's going to be, can be really dangerous. I believe it might be, I don't know, black and whites coming together slowly and like, oh, it's all great. But it can also be, like I said earlier, white kids throwing slurs and they don't know the meaning behind it. And unfortunately, maybe even the black kids don't understand the meaning behind it. And they'll be like, oh, okay. And that would be like the equivalent of calling somebody stupid when it's not.
So that's another interesting point. So do you feel like other black children are also disconnected to the history of just the N-word, racism, the systematic racism that occurs around them? Do you feel like that I know there's this, it's used as a catchphrase, being woke, being conscious, but are young black kids really understand what it means to be woke? It's not just kind of like holding a sign saying Black Lives Matter or screaming and yelling at a protest, but actually understanding the context behind why all of these things are happening.
I don't want to speak for every single teenager and child, but I have seen a disconnect between young black minorities and their history. Like, I remember when I was back at school, in high school, I'll see a black kid yell out the N-word and laugh, and other people will laugh. And I didn't get a chance to stop him because he left on the bus. But I was like, what are you doing? Like, out of all people to use that word with your skin color, you really want to use it? And do you even know why people used it back then and how it kind of contributes to the oppression that's happening now? Like, what?
So in your view, and this is a controversial topic,
Uh-oh.
do you feel like black kids should be able to use the N-word?
Oh my God.
And in what context do you think that it's okay or not okay for black people to use the N-word?
I feel because we were radically oppressed back then from the start of America, all the way where they quote unquote freed us, all the way, even though we're enslaved now, but that's a different conversation. But I believe that black people should use it.
We should.
Yes, because even though I feel like people ignore the part of history where we take ownership of the word and use it for ourselves, not in a manner where we're putting ourselves down or alienating each other, but in a manner of like brotherhood or like sisterhood. Like, even though it has the history of like the white man calling us the N-word to alienate us, to describe us as monkeys and what have you not, like that whole 100-year history, but people are forgetting like the history of like hip hop, like R&B, and how we use that word, but we don't associate it with the same way the white man associated with. So rather than bringing it back to slavery, we're just bringing it back to where we established and owned our own roots.
So, second part of, on that vein, then would you agree with the fact that, because it just sounds like it's an interesting argument, okay? We've heard this argument before.
Yeah.
So, is it okay for females then to call each other the B word under that same auspice?
I agree though.
So it would be a female calling another female, that's my B, is different than a male calling a female a B.
Oh yeah.
Would be the same way that it's okay for a black person to say the N-word to another black person, but not okay for a white person to say it.
I feel like a woman can call another woman the B word. I am in the same stance as another black person call another black person the N-word. But a white person call a black person the N-word, that's a no. That's a
So is it okay for a young white person to use the N-word in a non-derogatory? I'm just throwing these hypotheticals out there just to see like I think that is really interesting to see how views of things change with generations. So there's no right or wrong answer.
I have seen a lot of... Okay. So I feel like there's two ways to eliminate / to get used to the N-word. It's either going to be a verbal divide, and only black people and even like other minorities will call each other the N-word, and white people can't because they started something that was just blown out of proportion and just a mess. And then white people can't say the N-word, and then everybody else can. But they feel oppressed for some reason, but that's why they don't know their history. Sorry. Or we can let everybody say the N-word and live happily ever after, but that's going to be a direct cutoff between the history, because I believe like if we let white people say the N-word, and let's say, I don't know, 2 generations from now, everybody's going to live all happy, but it will, I don't know, bring down the significance of the segregation that we faced back then.
So it's not about the word, it's about recognizing the history of why you're using the word. So if you are using it with a history of we're now taking back and using it as a form of brotherhood or empowerment, then that's okay. But if you don't have a context behind it, or you're just using it as a form of degradation, then that is not okay. And it's just more like, so I'm trying to summarize or understand your point of view. So it's more likely for white people to use it in a way of degradation. And so that's why it is not acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
So, question.
Uh-oh.
Political question.
Oh, boy.
So there is rumored that there is a tape where the current person sitting inside of the White House has used the N-word on several occasions to refer to African Americans.
Mm.
If this tape actually is produced and it is heard, what do you think as a young person that impact would be?
I have a different point of view of the individual that is sitting in the White House. I feel like if he said it, honestly, to me, it's not a surprise. He's been very verbal to the different people in the country. He's racist. Like he's just racist. I'm sorry. Like, come on.
I gotta say sorry. It is what it is.
So, for me personally, I'm not sure about all young people, but I feel like it's going to be half and half. A lot of people are going to be like, Oh, what a surprise. He wanted to build a wall to keep Mexicans out. You think us black people are safe? Like, come on now. Just read the terrain. And other people will be like, oh, this is madness. We did not expect this. Oh my gosh, from a guy like him, oh, he's used the N-word. And if it releases and people want him out the White House, that's not gonna happen because people was caught doing worse things. And it's not a surprise if he used the N-word. It's just he already, I feel like the concrete dried. Like, people was like, oh, I'm uneasy about him, but he's our president, but he's also a lot of these other things. But I feel like, how long has he been president?
A year and a half, maybe.
A year and a half. Like, in a year and a half.
Forever, but I think it's been like a year and a half.
Like, it's been a year and a half, and I feel like the views that a lot of people have on him solidified. So the people who will say, oh no, it was locker room talk or something like before, they will still stand by him, and the people that don't like him will still don't like him.
Okay, so you don't think that it's going to change much? It's just just basically solidify what we already know.
Exactly.
Okay. If you're just tuning in, you're listening to WNHHLP 103.5 FM, New Haven's home for community radio. This is Mubarakah Ibrahim, and you're listening to Mornings with Mubarakah, where we talk about national issues from a local level, through a lens of diversity. And we are talking to spoken word artist Ihsan Abdussabur, and we're talking about his art that reflects his reality and how that happens. So tell me, you have a poem that is called "Are You of Darkness?"
Food for thought.
Are you not going to do the darkness one?
No, because Food for Thought, that's going to release in the next 2 days.
Okay.
So we can talk about it.
Yeah, we can do both of them.
Oh, we can do both of them.
Okay. Talk to me about darkness. What inspired that?
Darkness.
What inspired it?
Darkness, I remember I was scrolling through Instagram, and then I saw a post that said, every fear you have, you're taught. So everything, you can be afraid of spiders, but everybody taught you that. And you can be afraid of, I don't know, lamps, but you were taught that somewhere. And it said the 2 fears that you are born with, so it's somewhere in our DNA, is loud noises and darkness. And I was like, wow, that's crazy. That's why, like, a bunch of animals are like, when a volcano explodes, they run. It's not like, wow, a volcano. They're not looking at it like a rainbow. And like darkness, like, everybody's afraid of the dark. And I was thinking, I was like, what? I'm dark. I'm going to play with this for a little bit. So I wrote a poem based on that discovery. I was like, wow, this is gonna be fun. So I just asked my audience, are you afraid of the dark, after basically describing to them all the unfortunate things that happened throughout our history.
Okay, can you do that for us?
Want to read the whole poem or just little pieces?
Whole poem.
Okay. Every fear you have, you are taught, except 2. 2 fears you are born with. The fear of loud noises, and the fear of darkness. Darkness. Now I know why people are afraid of me. That's why people call me racial slurs and cross the street to be parallel to me. I know it sounds utterly absurd. It's like their own self-segregation in this color-coded nation to keep me separated. But equal, I feel like during this time is the end of the world prequels. Come on, people. I'm just saying questionable facts. And the question on my mind is, I'm just going to ask you for the first time is, are you afraid of the dark? People don't call me a witch, but yet they call me a black cat. Don't worry, I'm unarmed. Trayvon Martin, Eric Garner, Michael Browner, and more blacker and browner men you have yet to cause harm to. It's in my arm. Kendrick Lamar already established it's in our DNA. What more do I have to ask? What more do I have to say? I'm just going to ask you for a second time. Are you afraid of the dark? Despite you being in the dark, guess what you'll see when you look at me? You'll see embedded black excellence that's trying to bring relevance to us all, a 5'10" African-American who's actually a little soft, 17 years of age with a whole lot of heart. I'm just going to ask you for the third time, are you afraid of the dark? The racism in the system of a mindset is surely unfortunate. Seems like all these things are taught. Or is it? The abundance of your logical fallacies, believing black men are more dangerous than the lighter shade. What a hasty generalization that this nation seems to manifest and reproduce. What other clues do you need from the gentrification all the way down from the slaves that you were and aren't planning on freeing? All we did is want to be equal, so maybe the history of African Americans can have a sequel. We just want to foresee at least our future, since you took us from our past, taking us from Mother Earth's birthmark, Africa, to enslave us for 398 years, and there's more to last. Sit down, I'll teach you a class. I know a lot about my skin and how my melanin came to be, from a geographical perspective all the way to my biology. Please don't stand up. Please don't leave. Just try to have some type of heart. I'm just going to ask you for the 4th time. Are you afraid of the dark? When you see black men walk alongside you on sidewalks, do you automatically have a side view that they're centered from the streets? Do you clench your purse when they walk past you, or when you suspend us from schools, you wonder why we're not in classrooms? People automatically assume from what acute view they see of the 21st century African-American corrupted culture that many people with increased amount of melanin in their skin sell weed, heroin, and cocaine. But the true drug is being used against you. It's the repetition of societal views. It's the hatred generalizations, categorizing your logical fallacies that you use. It's the differences we have, because seeing more of our people kill each other and you killing us is the dark rehab that we have, but you can't see that because people prefer to cross the street or not bend their views and perspectives to see how hectic life can truly be in darkness. Regardless of the short view that's a little true of the violence that goes on in the darkness, you can't disregard the reasoning on why we have to live and make the decisions we do. From the psychological torture or the generational trauma that our ancestors faced, and how affected your views and how you see us in our DNA, and affected your views, how you see darkness. I'm just going to ask you for the 5th time. Are you afraid of the dark? Are you afraid of a 5'10" African American who's actually a little soft, who's 17 years of age and a whole lot of heart? I'm just going to ask you for the 6th time. Are you afraid of the dark? Are you afraid of me? Probably. Because every fear you have, you're taught. Except 2. 2 fears you're born with. The fear of loud noises. And the fear of darkness. Darkness. Now I know why you're afraid of me.
That was a phenomenal poem. Even the the first time that I heard it was absolutely phenomenal. So let me ask you, in the poem, you talk about kind of like one of the verses that stood out to me was the real drug is repetition, repetition, repetition. Break that verse down for me a little bit more.
It's funny how I'll go back to the line. I'll find it a little bit. But I describe a few different drugs in the African American community, because I think it's funny how I'll just say white America just says, all you black people are lazy, all you do is sit around and do drugs, and that's what is popularized. I remember watching Power or some new show, and it showed somebody was drinking alcohol at a party, but they showed somebody doing cocaine, and it was in an alley. But it's funny how they chose those 2 different scenes, because somebody can drink alcohol in the alley and somebody can be all sophisticated and do drugs, and like cocaine in, I don't know, a fancy hotel room. So the people were black, but I just think it's funny how people are saying, the black African Americans, and they all just do drugs and sit around all day, and that's ruining their bodies. When white America is only seeing the racist lens of the African American community constantly through Facebook, through being centralized in their own side, like left wing or right wing, and they just only look at conservative news, and that's it. They just watch Fox and everything that just spits out the same thing, just in a different way. So it's funny how people are like, they just do drugs and they're ruining their body, but I'm just going to listen to the same thing that's alienating another community that's a large portion of the country, and I'm just going to ruin my body that way.
So it becomes a drug that so the repetition of seeing these images
Mhm.
becomes a drug
Yeah,
that also ruins the body.
exactly.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Actually, that's a really good analogy. That is a really good analogy. When you think about yourself in relations to being American, what does that mean to you?
Being American?
Being African American. I mean, you could be a lot of different things, but do you, so here's the question. So I had a conversation the other day, and some African Americans say I'm black. Some people say I'm African American. I mean, I've even had people say, well, I'm African in America. So
Yeah.
how do you describe yourself?
I describe myself as African American. I believe saying black is such a white man's word because it just simplifies the history that brought you here. So a Jamaican can even come, but it's like when you're African American, you know your history. You were enslaved here and then you resided in Africa for a while. Let's say there's a Jamaican that comes over and to the United States. Somebody can call him black. There's a lot of Jamaican people that do not like that because that's not their history. It's automatically just generalized that, oh, it's not about where you come from. It's either you're white or you're just darker than that. And when you're darker than that, you know what category you fit in.
So it identifies you with your history.
Identifies you with the color of your skin rather than your history.
How do you think that changes the lens of how you view your place in society of being African American versus being descendants from immigrants? Do you think that you view the world differently?
What do you mean?
So someone your age who's not African, who's black, but they're not African American, do you think that it changes the way that you view the way things are because you have a history from slavery versus not from slavery?
Oh yeah, I feel like a lot of the struggle we face. What's that? There was some guy who said How to Make a Slave. Who wrote that?
Willie Lynch.
Willie Lynch. And he said this is how you keep. If you read it, a lot of it's not only physical torture, it's more psychological. It's like in your head. I noticed like being black in America is pretty tough, but a lot of it is coming from yourself because he said this is how you make a slave for 400 years. It's been only 398 actually, or 399. So a lot of it is still like wow, like a lot of it's still today. So I realized a lot of times I'll write a lot of these poems about like being oppressed and just demonizing kind of white America. But then I think about it, when was the last time somebody called me the N-word? And somebody did, but months later. But a lot of the stuff I write about is stuff that we pick apart in the system that is probably true, but a lot of it is struggle from day to day. I remember I was walking downtown with my sister, and she was talking about how Yale did the overdoses to clean out the whole city so all the Yale students can come back. Like, that is like, wow. I'm not going to have a stance on it right now because I got to think it through. But a lot of the stuff is not clarified or it's not validated to us. Like, oh, systematic oppression. Like, a lot of white America's just like, what? That doesn't happen, silly. Relax. They're just trying to make money. You're like, no, but you see the history and how he's picked apart and just see. So a lot of it is within ourselves, but it's also there. So it's just hard not to, I guess, bring yourself down when you know about it.
So do you think that it is damaging in any way to constantly have the news and people constantly telling us, let me rephrase that. Is it damaging in any way to Black people to have to watch and be retold about both the external and systematic racism. Like, it's constantly seeing people get shot different than we knew it was happening before, but you know, as again, this is validation that it's happening, or being told kind of like before you're going along and like, oh, this is just the way it is, and then somebody saying it's this way because this is how the systematic oppression happens, and now they basically have brought aware to you that what you thought was just a regular reality is really designed. Is that damaging to, one, is it damaging to the thought process of Black people? And number two, do you think that it plays against us and make people just feel worse about their situation?
It's the differences we have, because seeing more of our people kill each other and you killing us is the dark rehab that we have. The dark rehab. It's the dark rehab. It's bad. It's dark. It's in the corner. It's under the cave. But it's also the dark rehab, as in it's our rehab. It's the minority.
That's
rehab.
The way you rehabilitate from it, by it being recognized.
It's the lack of rehabilitation.
It's
really.
The lack of rehabilitation. So
because it's hard being freed, and then you get to have jobs, and then you're a citizen, and then you watch your leaders get killed, and you watch your people get thrown away into trash communities and without any government support. And then you have the personal oppression from watching all the societal lens of how you're pretty much a terrible person. You're bringing down the country. And then it's broader to the neighborhoods that a lot of people are struggling in, and people getting shot and killed and put in these conditions that only allow them to go to damaging and even more harsh conditions. Like, a lot of Black people are either faced like, okay, so you just gonna kill people, or are you just gonna do some drugs? Pick two. And a lot of white people is just like, all right, son, you know, it's funny. Actually, you know, I'm going to college, and it's funny because a lot of people of color, that is more of a luxury. But I feel like in white America, I've seen that is necessary. It's like, oh, what college you going to? Oh, no, I'll decide. I mean, I don't know, my dad would pick it for me. But I've seen a lot of minorities. They're like, oh, what college you going to? And they're like, ooh, I don't know. It depends. I'm not sure. I'll just go to the local community college. So it's a lot of the personal and the differences that we have with other people. The luxuries, that's for us, it's just, I don't know, the bottom of the barrel for them. It don't matter.
Interesting.
But I feel like, yeah, it's damaging.
So how do we, as Black people, you as the younger generation of Black people, actually rehab and become more progressive, and meaning making changes, meaning create, what is a realistic way that you think equality between the races can happen?
Equality.
Or do you think that that's possible in America?
I don't know. Probably. We took a real big step back with, that was the revenge for Obama with our new president. We took a real big step back. I feel like there is a lot of pressing issues to the government, and racism and systematic racism isn't one of them. For me,
so the government isn't prioritizing systematic racism.
No, it's not. And the thing is, it's funny because the way that Black America was conditioned, Black is now meaning poor, but the way white America got raised is white means rich. And now the argument is, oh, we're not racist. We just don't hang out with poor people. But because it's so intertwined, you can't really separate the two. But there has been a lot of Black people who are now rich and millionaires, billionaires, and they make a lot of money, and you see them going into the white circle. So America now isn't really about Black and white. It's about rich and poor. But they conditioned us in a way where Black means poor. So a lot of the times, I feel like they're doing the same thing, just in a different way. So a lot of times it's like, oh, we can't free black people. It's like wild out here. Oh my gosh, we're gonna put them in the same schools as us. Oh, this is crazy. And now they're just like, okay, let's just look at people from these type of schools and just make this neighborhood go to this school. Oh, everybody in the neighborhood is white. Oh, that's just a coincidence. Oh, it doesn't matter.
So how do we get past that though? Do you think that we can do it on an individual level, or does it have to come from a governmental level of dismantling the systems that create racism?
I feel like it should be on a governmental level in the system, because there's a lot of stuff that you can do for your neighbor, but there's not a lot of stuff you can do for your neighborhood. So when there's a lot of, I feel like arguments, when people just want like, oh, we want equal pay, oh, we want equal housing, we want to have the same neighborhoods as white America. But if you look at it, the foundation of America is based on the Constitution and the amendments and all the old sacred writing. And a lot of stuff that needs to be done for Black America, you will literally have to disregard that sacred writing that America's foundation is based on. And America's not going to let that happen. The Supreme Court, oh no, that's what they run off of. Like Congress, that's what they abide by. So a lot of the things that need to be done for us can be done on the individual level. But if you want to really shake the system, it's sad when Black people want equality, it's shaking the system. But the system's not for us. So that's the thing. So we have to make it for us.
Okay. So you're getting ready to do your first video associated with a poem. And tell me the inspiration behind this new a spoken word piece.
Well, the spoken word piece called Food for Thought is one of the popular poems that I wrote. It's actually 8 minutes long, but I'm making a video and I shortened it and it's only going for 2 minutes. So it is a lot. It's the foundation on it is based on, I just think the thing that made me more happy and more Black pride is that I always joke around. I'm like, oh, I'm chocolate, everybody. And everyone's like, aha, they get used to me. Even in Spanish class, I said, I'm amor de chocolate. I'm chocolate love. And they're just, and say like people laugh about it and stuff. And so I was like, maybe I can share that with other people, but twist it so it can be for Black people in the audience and can be for white people in the audience. And so the poem's called Food for Thought. Throughout the poem, I describe not liking candy, like not liking chocolate. And then I'll switch around and talk about not liking Black people and be like, oh, I wasn't talking about that. I was just talking about candy. I just hate these Hershey's and these wrappers on the bus. Oh, I was talking about Hershey wrappers. I wasn't talking about, no, it wasn't that. Oh, were you? Oh, now you know. Now you know what you're thinking of. So it was more of a challenge for the audience.
It's a challenge for, do you want to read? So before we read a little bit, we'll go out on you reading some of that poem. We only have a few more minutes left to the show. So tell me how audience can hear more of your art.
Well, I started a Facebook page. Okay. Ihsan Abdussabur, Ihsan Abdussabur. It's a picture of me with a blue hoodie. You can't miss it, all black and white. And I am going to do, I'm going to be advertising a lot of my videos for that and directing it towards my YouTube page, which I have. I'm trying to get a lot of followers so I can spread the message of deep critical thinking about the world around us. That is also my name, Ihsan Abdussabur. And I have an Instagram, Indigo Ihsan. IND, I don't even know how to spell that. But it's Indigo Ihsan. Everything else is my name. I will be posting more videos throughout the week. My first one should release either tomorrow or Friday, which is exciting. And yeah. So follow, subscribe, like, and stay tuned.
All right. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in. You've been listening to Mornings with Mubarakah on WNHHLP. We are here every Wednesday morning at 10 a.m. We are going to sign out the show today with Food for Thought with Ihsan.
Food's so good. Doesn't matter where you are. It matters what you eat, not what you could. Food so good. Doesn't matter where you are, it matters if you should. Mm. Food so good. Doesn't matter where you are, eating Skittles under a hood. No. Or holding midnight snacks for the family as Sickerman Zimmerman takes the initiative to take Tracy Martin's kid. Disheartening this is, especially to take the life of the defensive kid, being shot with extremely close range on February 26th. Was 17-year-old but now 6 feet under. Before trying to run and defend himself, Trayvon was followed by someone else. Zimmerman called the red, white, and don't shoot, but still pursued Trayvon as one, taking his tastefully timely life with a 9mm handgun. Black men always seem to be a threat. Maybe it's the chocolate in our skin, the melanin that's visually harming them. Everyone looking at this candy, but no one wants to get a taste. No one wants to be drinking your own blood as you lay on the side of your cold chocolate face. Training to the views of many melanin, not in many schools, but trainings in society. Racism now isn't torture for the living like in slavery because they're taking lives faster in the 21st century. The speed they're doing the injustice is getting faster, faster, faster. Odds are sorry for not dying fast enough, master. Odds are just keep asking myself, is it my own fault? Ihsan. Was my clothes too baggy to be welcoming? Am I helping the overall ideals of a black man? Are you perpetuating the pressure that society has upon you? Did I wear that hat too high? Is it too dim to wear those bright shoes? What clues do you get, rather than to break these eye stares instead of those head nods? A metal rod you have to cast to break these eyes shakers. Or can you really talk about being black so easily? Easier than food being a natural icebreaker. Thank you.
And that's all for us today. And I will end to remind you, as I remind you every week, go about your week to be a voice and not an echo.